Great. Welcome everybody to the third of our workshops today, as we look to address sustainability and climate change. And this particular workshop I'm excited about is around the role of sport in changing our world for the better. I'm going to be joined by three panelists who I'll introduce as we go through the session, but we're going to start with a very short message from Miguel Naranjo, who's the representative of the United Nations Climate Neutral Now initiative.
Hello, my name is Miguel Naranjo, and I am Program Officer at the UNFCCC Secretariat, also known as UN Climate Change. I want to thank One Carbon World for the invitation to join you in this session, and I apologize for not being able to join virtually, but live. This is because we are in the middle of our conference, COP26. Your session is on the power of sports to shape the future or to help change the future. The Climate Change Secretariat has a sectoral initiative called Sports for Climate Action, which has been going for 2 years now, in collaboration with all of the big organizations in the sports sector, the International Olympic Committee, Paralympic Committee, FIFA, UEFA, big teams, small teams, all over the world. The initiative aims to promote the reduction of the carbon footprint of sporting events and sporting organizations, and also using the power of sports to communicate to the general public about the urgency of taking climate action and what they can do. We also want these organizations and their events to serve as examples, to lead by example of what taking action on climate is. The challenge is relatively big, and it's a challenge that we all face. Sports organizations and sports events face a type of challenge. Organizations in aviation industry, on event organization, or the film and TV industry, etc., they all face their own challenges. So the importance of the sports industry, or the particularity of the sports industry, is the reach that it has. It has the capacity to influence and to communicate to an enormous audience globally. It is key that the sports organizations support the call for ambitious, immediate, urgent action on climate, and that they lead by example. In addition to this, using the power of sports to influence your supply chains. The supply chain of the sports industry is enormous. If you think about all the partnerships and sponsorships that happen in sports events and sporting teams, and if you think about all the different suppliers that make events such as the Olympics or the World Cups or even the regular championships happen, that supply chain is enormous. So if sports organizations take leadership in greening their operations and encouraging the greening of their suppliers, their potential influence is very big. So we hope to see more action in the sports sector, aligning with the Sustainable Development Goals and the Paris Agreement, to ensure that we will have a planet and a society that is sustainable for the coming generations. With that, I hope that you have a very good session, and I look forward to hearing how it went. Thank you very much.
Great, good start. And this is going to be shortly followed by another short message from Hannah Mills, MBE, who's one of the UK's great sailing athletes.
Welcome everyone to One Carbon World's talk on how sport can help change our world for the better. My background is the Olympics and competing as an athlete, but my passion is sustainability and helping create a better future for our planet. I've recently started competing in SailGP for the British team, and it's just awesome to see a sports organisation that is purpose-led and not just about sport, but about the future and creating a better planet for all. One Carbon World have been a big part of helping SailGP be the first sailing organisation to achieve the carbon neutral international standard. Being at COP26 last week and launching our most recent campaign where we united over 50 global Olympians and Paralympians from the Tokyo 2020 Games. Backed by the IOC, we created a video that was addressing the world leaders and governments to be ambitious in creating a healthy, safe planet for all. And I guess it just emphasised to me how incredible sport can be in creating positive change. Today's talk is going to highlight some of these incredible projects that are helping sport protect its pitch. Enjoy the session, ask lots of questions, and thank you again for all the support.
Dear leaders of the world.
Dear leaders of the world.
Dear leaders of the world.
This summer, at the Tokyo Olympic and Paralympic Games,
we as athletes chased excellence in the face of challenges.
To overcome obstacles.
To lead the pack.
To go faster, higher, stronger.
Together.
Under immense pressure and adversity.
We delivered.
Meeting goals that others believe impossible.
Tokyo and the people of Japan delivered.
When many thought it impossible.
Each Games seeks to deliver a lasting legacy.
But how do we pass on that legacy if there isn't a safe and healthy planet to experience it?
Heat, humidity and extreme weather conditions
mean many of our sports are already under threat.
And sport is just one part of a much greater global picture.
We did our utmost this summer.
And we know that when we strive to achieve our best, others come with us.
Now, it's your chance to deliver.
This is the race we need to win.
And the speed of the race is determined by each of the participants in it.
At COP26,
the Olympics of Climate Summits,
we need you to lead us.
To show real ambition and courage.
Working together to secure the future that we all depend on.
Anything less won't win this race.
Over the next fortnight, we will be looking to you and supporting you.
To forge the ultimate legacy.
A healthy, safe Earth for all.
Yours, athletes of the world. Wow. That just shows you, doesn't it, the power of athletes and sport to create change, and their voice challenges all of us. So I'm Richard Jackson. I'm the Sustainability Director for UCL, and I'm going to be hosting this particular session. UCL, University College London, we've set ourselves a highly ambitious target to reduce our carbon emissions to net zero by 2030. But equally, we're looking to drive sustainability across everything we do, the research we produce, and the students that come out of UCL. And the power for university is about those students and where they take their knowledge and where they use that knowledge going forward. This particular session is really important to me. It's important because before joining UCL 10 years ago, I worked for 7 years as the head of sustainability for the Olympic Delivery Authority. So my role was looking to drive sustainability into the design and construction of the Olympic site for London 2012. And it was such an exciting role to play. It was exciting because of what we achieved. We achieved some amazing venues, of which the legacies are all around us in London. We also thought about legacy through the way we designed and constructed this site. A lot of the venues which we felt there was no legacy need for, we put up as temporary venues. But it was during the Games itself that we really kind of wanted to shine a light on sustainability and try and drive the change through the Games that were put on, the show, the event, what we wanted participants in the event to do. And it shows you the power of sporting events to create a much wider change. And so what's really interesting for me about today is to hear from organisations which are looking at their own sports, looking at their own institutions first, but also looking at the sports and the role that their sports can play in driving change. Now, as all of you know, there's an opportunity for you to ask some questions at the end of this session. So please go onto Slido and put your questions down, and I will come to you when we get to that point in this session. I'm going to start, though, with Fiona Morgan, who is the Global Director of Purpose and Impact at SailGP. And we're going to start with a short video.
It doesn't matter where you live. You can live on the coast, you can live in the middle of a continent. But your life is absolutely dependent on the work of other species. The problem is that we have been abusing our natural world so much that nature cannot keep up with us. We are destroying our only home. We are unplugging our life support system for short-term gain. But the world is moving, and there is huge momentum. There is no going back.
We have a real opportunity to change attitudes and to help actually to create solutions. We really felt that there was an opportunity to help promote the acceleration to clean energy and champion a cleaner world powered by nature.
At SailGP, we're climate positive, which means you have more impact on the world than your footprint. We race for the future for our kids, for our families, for the cities we all live in and race at, and for our oceans.
I have hope because I have seen the ability of the ocean to recover, to bounce back, if we just give it space. The sailing community have a huge role to play because sports have the ability to reach more people than anything else on the planet. We all depend on each other's behavior. There is no me alone anymore. The best way for people to understand what we're doing to the planet is to see it. And the best way for people to act is to fall in love again with nature. So sailors, please take as many people as possible into the ocean. Take people with you. That's one of the longest term contributions that you can make.
Great. Hi, Fiona. How are you?
Hi, everyone. I'm great. Hi, Richard.
Great. And welcome to this session. I'm going to jump straight into a question, Fiona, because I really want to know, in your opinion, what do you think is the role of sport and big events in the fight against climate change?
Yeah, I think we've heard some great opinions so far, but it's really the voice of sport. You know, it's our voice for good, really driving awareness of the issue, because I think I'm going to use the words of a really wise person, way wiser than me, and most people on the call might know, but sport does have the power to change the world, to unite. It inspires, it speaks a language to young people, which is really important and relatable that other things don't. And it does bring hope when there is despair. So obviously Nelson Mandela, that's his very wise words, but I do think the power of sport really is unrivaled because it's so relatable and it's built on passion. You know, people all idolize their teams or their favorite athletes, and everyone has a passion for some kind of sport or activity. And if sport acts as a platform for good, fans will listen and they will act differently. So that to me really is the critical power of sport for good and what we can do. We can all operate differently. I think we'll come on to that. As sports, we need to, as businesses, be more sustainable. But actually, I think our power is our voice.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, coming on to SailGP, what do you think, or tell us a little bit more about your efforts to address sustainability?
Yeah, so we're a new sport. So we have obviously Formula One here today, but we call ourselves, we're like the fastest racing on water. And it'd be good to see if we're as fast as a Formula One car on water. It'd be good to do an experiment one day. But that's what we are. We're global. So we race all over the world, and we have nation versus nation teams. And we're coming to the end of the season in March next year. But we are 2 seasons, so we're kind of a toddler in sport, kind of new. And we had DNA, you know, in the DNA, purpose and sustainability, because we're a new sport and we were born out of this kind of desire to make our sport better. So we want to make sailing better, and we want to make our sport better for the planet. So I think, you know, we were kind of born out of that. And when I talk about those 2 areas, you know, we set an ambition early on that we want to be the most sustainable and purpose-driven global sport in the world. So that's what drives us. We want to act like that. We want to make the right decisions, and we want to really operate in that way. So what that means is obviously working with great partners. And the first thing we did was look at our climate action plan. So I think you'll see beside me, we have our sustainable development focus goals on the stern plates of our F50 boats. And the climate action plan is being climate positive. So there's a lot of jargon out there, but the reason we want to be climate positive is we want to have that optimism about what we're doing in climate action. And it means that obviously we have more impact than our footprint. We've set a great target of 55% carbon reduction by 2025, and that's based on science, and that's working with great partners like UN Climate Neutral Now and One Carbon World. So obviously we measure our footprint, so we know what it is, scope 1, 2, and 3, because you have to look at the whole responsibility of your league. And scope 3 is hard because that's your fans. So in most big sports, that's super hard to do, but you have to understand it to be able to kind of interact and change it in the way you do. And we obviously we reduce. So we have reduction strategies across all of our areas. So everyone has a carbon calculator or software that they plug in, and they look at how can they reduce their footprint. So logistics, shipping, every single food that we eat at events. So every area feels that they have to reduce what they're doing. And then we obviously contribute what we can obviously reduce at the moment. And we work with One Carbon World and the UN to look at renewable energy projects in developing countries in that side of what we do. So that's kind of us. I think the focus, it's not just environmental sustainability. I think, Hannah, you heard earlier, is one of our athletes who is an inspiration to everyone. And we look at environmental and social sustainability in the way that we race the future is kind of our ethos at SailGP. So we want to get female athletes on our boats. It's really important. At the moment, sailing is not that inclusive a sport. There's a huge experience gap. So we're working a lot on that, as well as our environmental credentials. And we have one big thing we're doing, but I'll wait and tell you about that later. But obviously we take it very seriously. We have a lot to do. We're not perfect. We have a lot to do, but it's great to kind of share learnings cross sport and with other organizations, and just try to be brave in the way we're approaching it.
Oh, that sounds fantastic. I'm interested. Everything you've said sounds like you're really digging into sustainability across your sport. So why do you think that SailGP is the leader or pioneer in its sector?
Well, I think we're leading in the marine industry in many ways because we're tackling our worst problems. So the worst problem that we have is our support fleet. So over 55% of our footprint as a global league is not the lovely F50s, which is behind me. They're powered by nature, so they're foiling boats. But it's all of the hospitality boats, the media boats, the guest chaser boats, the team chasers. So these boats have to go very, very fast on the water for health and safety or to capture content. Or we have a helicopter in the sky, obviously doing our broadcast. That's a real problem in the marine industry, and every kind of sailing or marine sport has the same problem, because unfortunately the marine industry is not like the motor industry. So we don't have electric engines that we can just kind of plug and play at different ranges. So that is our massive challenge as an organization. But what we're doing is tackling it. So we're talking about it. We're trying to find innovators. We're investing in it. We're working with other sports like Paris 2024, World Sailing. The motorsport industry, actually speaking to some of the Formula One teams, because they have technology that maybe we can learn from. So I think it's identifying the problem and being brave enough to go, right, we don't know how we're going to get there. We've set a target by 2025 to have all of our boats on water powered by nature. That's hard. We don't know how we're going to get there, but we're going to try really hard to collaborate with academics, with other organizations to do that. So I think that's kind of one part of leading the way, is you have to be honest about what your challenges are and try and tackle them and look at a solution for them, working with other partners. You can't just sit back and wait, unfortunately, for a solution to come. That's not the world we're in. We're all in, climate crisis at the moment. So I think things like that is one element. The second element I'm so happy to talk about is the Impact League. So we are the first ever sport to kind of change the rules, redefine performance, and make athlete activism the norm, like you're hearing today from Hannah and other athletes. So at the beginning of the season, we started and thought, right, what can we do as a sport? We're competitive, we have a league. What can we do in sustainability and climate action really to drive forward and really kind of use all of our voice for good? And we came up with the Impact League, which is a second league. So in our final race, there's 2 podiums, one for the planet, one for racing on the water. I mean, that is amazing. Imagine the Olympics celebrating medal winners for sustainability, not just for performance. So we launched it. It's hard. We have 10 criteria, that the teams have to act against at every race. And that's sustainability, everything from travel to energy use to food, to obviously looking at inclusion. How are they mentoring people to get into the sport? And it's externally audited. This is serious. So, it's a very competitive league. And if you watch any of our press conferences, you'll hear we ask our athletes about the Impact League as well as the other league, and they're fighting talk. Sir Ben Ainsley, our GBR skipper, he wants to win. He's fighting, but he's actually behind at the moment. The New Zealand team are winning. And so it's really kind of embedding it in what we do. It's in the rules of our sport. So it makes the teams have to race for more than just performance. And I think, not all sports can do that, but they can do a kind of version of the Impact League, and it's embedding it because it's behavior change. And 6 races, we're 6 races in, and it's just incredible to see how the teams are, operating differently and using their voice for good, their content, their channels. They're talking about climate change. They're talking about how they're trying Beyond Meat burgers and a vegan diet and how it's great. And, it's that education piece, and the Impact League has driven that quicker than if you just kind of put it in a policy. I think we're over policies and spreadsheets. We need to start acting. So that to me is one of the other things that we're leading in. And I hope we are, inspire other sports and businesses to kind of take on that concept of changing, redefining performance in what they do.
Wow, that's fantastic. Thank you, Fiona. And if there's one thing that exemplifies is how competition can help us to drive the change. Where you have healthy competition, it kind of creates this impetus for people to want to try and drive change within themselves, obviously to win, but ultimately it enables us to deliver that change.
Yeah, and I think there's no losers in the Impact League. I think that is one thing to say. It's competitive, but there's no losers because everyone's winning positive actions, and we've got NGOs involved to help win the money at the end. I think, like you said, although it's competitive, everyone's winning because they're all learning, and they are happy because they're in their everyday life or in their sport, they're getting better. So yeah, I think it's good to kind of get that competitive element in sustainability to go faster.
Great, thanks, Fiona. We're going to come back to you in questions, but I want to introduce our second panelist now. Our second panelist is Dr. Russell Seymour, who's the Chief Executive of BASIS. BASIS is the British Association for Sustainable Sport. Russell, I wondered if you could tell us a little bit more about BASIS's mission.
Yeah, absolutely. And apologies if my doorbell went off. Somebody's going to go and answer that, I hope, before it rings again. Look, BASIS, the British Association for Sustainable Sport, we do exactly what the name suggests. We try and get sustainability principles into the way that we manage and operate sport at all levels. So in terms of the vision and mission, the vision is to harness the power of sport to build a sustainable future. Exactly the stuff that Fiona's just been talking about so eloquently around SailGP. And our mission is to empower sport in the UK to become a world leader in sustainability with the urgency dictated by the science. So we're definitely science-led. That doesn't mean that we're solely talking about science and trying to push that into sport, but it's about talking about these issues through the lens of sport, exactly as your questions have been asking, Richard, and Fiona's already responded to, and I'm sure Charlie will respond to later as well. So we're really trying to be a hub to go between some elements of the science, but then take that into the sports sector and facilitate the sports sector to then respond to those issues.
Great, thanks. Russell, can you give us some sort of concrete examples of how you encourage, educate, influence some of your members and stakeholders to work together towards sustainability? Yeah,
I think we try to provide the solutions. We'll never take credit for what our members are actually doing, but we try and assist as much as we possibly can. So we really try and facilitate those activities. The clubs and the venues themselves, they know their operations better than we do. So we really try and go in. We offer training, we offer education. So we run courses in fundamentals of sustainability for sports organisations, which really presents the sustainability issues that we have, like I say, based on the science that we have at the moment. and then put sport into that context. So in terms of our training, we don't necessarily go in and just say, here's a load of case studies, copy what everybody else is doing. We'll go in and we'll talk about what the issues are and what you can then do to respond to those. We also have a certification scheme. We've developed 12 principles that we work on that we can then assess and we can benchmark venues against. And just regular webinars, forums. We work with the Sport Environment Alliance in Australia, for example, and we have what we call our Commonwealth Climate Conversations, where we're actually trying to get common solutions to these issues. So really for us, it's about facilitating the conversations and assisting our members, the venues and the clubs along the way.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. I mean, a third question for you, and it kind of, I suppose, slightly relates to my former role in working on the London 2012 Olympics. But what do you think will be the role of sustainability in sporting events in the next 10, 20 years?
Look, clearly it's hard to predict the future. 10 years is actually a really long time. So my feeling is it will be, well, my hope really is that it's going to be fairly low key. It should just be what we're doing. It should just be how we're operating normally. And maybe we won't even be talking in terms of doing something in a sustainable way. It's just what we do. At the moment, I still think it's newsworthy if an organisation is doing something particularly strong, reducing carbon footprints, managing their waste in certain ways. We need that information to be out there. We need people to be picking up these different case studies and everybody picking up these ways of doing things. But in 10 or 20 years' time, it should just be the way that we operate. And in some ways, everything that we do as an organisation, as a venue, as a sports body, we're already making a decision about sustainability. If we're choosing not to switch to renewable energy, there may be some valid reasons for not doing that at the moment. But really, in the fairly near future, there probably shouldn't be. But we're already making decisions around our catering, around our waste management, around our cleaning policies, etc. So really, sustainability is just about asking the right questions to the right people at the right time and making those changes as you can. And hopefully, within 10 years, 20 maximum, we really ought to have this nailed, and sustainability should just be part of how we actually operate. And then the power for sport is that the participants and the fans that come to our venues, come to see these fantastic spectacles, have all these positive emotions linked to that, will pick up on exactly those behaviours, and this just becomes normal behaviour.
Yeah, thanks, Russell. I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I agree with you. I think, in 10, 20 years' time, it should be part of the norm. I mean, for somebody who's working in this field for 30 years, I think what I've seen in the past 5 years is a real acceleration in interest and action taken on sustainability. Thank you. I'm going to move to our third panellist. And our third panellist is Charles Miners, who's the Head of Strategy and Business Development for Formula One, which probably doesn't need an introduction, but is going to get one with a short video.
There's a huge drive for sustainability in Formula One.
Switching to remote operations has meant we've almost halved the number of people that we take around the world, as well as reducing travelling freight by 34%.
And as F1, we are a platform of innovations.
We've banned single-use plastics for staff at events, and we'll be working with catering companies to provide more sustainable menu choices.
Great to see Formula One really leading the charge with a sustainable future.
Our Grand Prix events will be sustainable by 2025, and the World Championship will be carbon neutral by 2030. F1 is also pioneering a drop-in fuel that is 100% sustainable, which could be utilised by vehicles across the world.
Because we can't destroy the world for the next generations.
Hi, Charles, and welcome to the event. Good afternoon. Let's find out a little bit more about your strategy. So you launched an ambitious sustainability strategy in 2019. How are you going? How's it going?
Great. Yeah, really good. Probably shouldn't sound surprised by that, but I think anyone who knows Formula One pretty well will know it's not a sport that sits still for very long. So despite being a fairly challenging couple of years, shall we say, for everyone really, it's been really encouraging to see how much all the F1 teams, all our partners, promoters have leaned into this topic. I guess a few of the things that, we've really, been proud of or focused on in the last few years. Project Pit Lane was something that took us really out of our own sporting realm. For anyone who's not familiar with it, the UK government set out a challenge to help create, new ventilators or get ventilators to market quicker to support the COVID pandemic. We had a huge number of the F1 teams all collaborating together, and they ended up using that innovative technological brainpower and accelerating this kind of R&D timeline from about 2 years to about 4 weeks to get a product to market with open source design in 105 different markets globally. So that was pretty amazing. Really nothing to do with our sport and sustainability, I guess, but some of those points that have been touched on already about the potential of sports to have a wider impact, I think that was a really good example of it. And then focusing on our own operations. We're a sport similar to SailGP and others. We've got challenges with the emissions from the events themselves, but really logistics is a big part. So we focused in 2020 on reducing our emissions from our remote broadcast. So you saw in that video, we had a huge kind of push to accelerate this program to deliver remote broadcast operations. And that was great. I mean, we ended up reducing our technical cargo by about 34%, which is no mean feat when you think about what we've got to take around the world and what we have to, capture and put out there as our edit every couple of weeks. And then finally, we've continued to also focus on reducing our single-use plastics at the circuit. Not just us, but all 10 F1 teams have eliminated single-use plastic bottles from their trackside operations this year. It may not sound like much, but trust me, trying to do that in COVID times when nobody wants to touch buttons together made it an interesting challenge, but really pleased with the outcome that we've had. And I think we could be saving up to almost 1 million bottles over the year just from all of our partners and teams not taking bottles to the circuits. So yeah, just a few highlights. Had some other fun things like more vegan options. That was an interesting conversation with some of our people, but all good steps in reducing our impact.
Yeah, who doesn't love a vegan burger these days? I'm interested, alongside what you said about logistics and single-use plastics and catering as well. I mean, what do you think, or how do you think Formula One can really make a difference in this space?
Yeah, I mean, look, Richard's touched on it earlier in his introduction, and so did Miguel. I mean, there's a huge power of influence that sports have over our passionate fan base. We have 500 million fans worldwide, and therefore we have a real opportunity to influence their behaviours. But also sports like us, uniquely F1, and actually kind of SailGP as well, as Fiona touched on, we're technology-led sports. So we've got this opportunity to influence a whole industry. And for 70 years, we've been doing that. We've been influencing the automotive sector with whether it's better braking technology or safety features or energy recovery systems. And we've got another opportunity to do that. As you saw in that video, sustainable fuels is something that we're really betting on big for the future. From 2026, all our cars will be running 100% sustainable fuels. And look, we think that's important. We think that electric vehicles, they've clearly got a role to play. But we know, as Fiona said, the marine industry is not really well matched for electric vehicles necessarily. Neither is the airline industry. The energy density of batteries just isn't there yet. So actually, we want to develop these drop-in fuels. And that means that they can not just be applied to, new vehicles that fall off the production line, but we have the ability to reduce the emissions from over 1 billion cars already on the road worldwide. This is a drop-in fuel that will work with existing infrastructure and existing cars. So I think that's one of those really kind of exciting moments. It's an ambitious project. We're delivering it in conjunction with all our partners, the FIA, the OEMs that are involved in the sport. But it's one that if we get it right, we can have a transformative impact across the whole of the transport sector. So it's got an incredibly exciting opportunity to be a catalyst for change.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose my third question really is around technology, and you've talked about fuels, but it strikes me that this is a really big opportunity, working with F1 and all the engineers you have around you. Are there any other areas where F1 technology could help change the wider world?
Yeah, I think that there probably are, and it's probably a topic that hasn't been explored enough in the past. And even Fiona said in her speech that she'd been talking to F1 teams about how they can use their technology. If we look across what's come out of some of these teams and their engineers, it's incredible. Williams Advanced Engineering a few years ago, they worked with Sainsbury's on a project to increase the efficiency of their open fridges by using the same CFD aerodynamic technology you find on the wing of an F1 car. And what resulted was about a 20% reduction in the emissions of these fridges. And that's been rolled out to 5,000 supermarkets, about 1.5 million fridges in total. And then if you look beyond that, when you look at what F1 is already a specialist in doing, it's in making things lighter, lightweight. How can you be more efficient with your materials use? And we can do a huge amount to reduce flying and all of these things. But actually, I think that lightweighting of materials is going to be a really important part of that. If you could reduce the weight of each plane seat, for example, by a few percent, and then you times that up by all the planes in the seat and then all the planes in the sky, you can have, again, a really powerful effect by taking technology that was originally designed for, I don't know, making a little car go faster around the track and applying it to some of the world's bigger problems.
So, I mean, it's really interesting listening to all three panelists, because, you know, I think what you've done is you've exemplified kind of the power of sport, your different sporting fields, but also what you can do to, I suppose, cascade this kind of best practice and drive for sustainability outside of your sports to the general public. And I suppose my first question really for all of you is about how you engage with the wider public. I mean, I think this is a particularly challenging area because, you know, you've got your spectators, but how on earth do you convince your spectators that what you're doing is the right thing for them? And I'll start with you, Fiona.
I think it's not actually that hard, to be honest. I think it's about educating them and just talking about it, right? And I think Sky actually, you know, I used to be at Sky for a long time. And I think Sky have done a brilliant job of that, because what they do is they're a broadcaster and they use their voice for good. So, you know, when we had Sky Ocean Rescue, our plastics campaign, you know, we launched it with cricket. So we launched it with the Oval, and we talked to 2 million fans about plastic that probably would never have thought why there's an issue with plastic. And you don't talk worthy or judgmental, you just talk about it. So you're kind of educating them. And Sky had the first net zero carbon football game the other day, Chelsea and Tottenham. I mean, who would have ever thought that? And the whole reason they did it was to educate people watching what even net zero meant. I mean, everyone's so confused. There's so many words flying around. So I think it's not that difficult. It's opening the conversation, right? If we can even, if people can even through sport understand climate change, just what the word is and what it means, or 1.5 degrees, we've started. You know, and that to me is our job. I think, you know, we can obviously, you know, like through the Impact League, our athletes talk about sustainable changes they're making, you know, how they're traveling differently or eating differently. We can talk about that. But I think we've got to go back one step, and there's still such a miseducation about people to understand the problem and how they can change. We can kind of start, I think sport can kind of start at that beginning and open the discussion. That's kind of my view on that.
So, Russell, I mean, have you got anything to add to that particular response?
I think I completely agree, to be perfectly honest. I think, you know, if you're a fan and you're going to a sports event, you're not there to be lectured to, you're there to enjoy yourself. And you've got that passion, you've got that link for your team that you support for so many years. The power that sport has is to just make all of this sustainability stuff completely normal. You know, don't point it out. Give enough information that an interested fan will see what you're doing and will understand it, but it should just be completely normal. You know, if you're a football fan or a rugby fan or even a cricket fan, and you go along to the venue and you're using a reusable cup most of the time now, rather than just single-use plastics, that sort of message will stick in your mind, and probably think about the plastics, not because you've been told you shouldn't be using single-use plastics, but because it's just normal behaviour that your club is doing, and that will come to you. If there are recycling bins at the venue, when you're at home, you'll probably be more inclined to put your waste in the proper bin, etc. So I think sport can do a lot of active management when you're planning the event, but sport, as it presents itself to the public and to the fans, can be quite passive in this. And I do mean passive in a positive sense. Don't take that word sort of in a different context. But the fan should be there and just see this as normal behaviour and how we deliver our events.
Yeah, I agree, Russell. I suppose there is an element to which, though, you also want your spectators, your fans, to also sort of take a message away and also to look at their own behaviours. And I suppose, Charles, with regards to Formula One, you'll no doubt be considering kind of how do your spectators get to the races? Is there a way you can influence that? Is there a way you can change their behaviours through some of the ways they engage with your particular sport?
Yeah, there is. And look, I think you're right that there are chances to get your fans involved in this. I think a good way of doing it, we talked about the passion of fans earlier, and that passion obviously comes through the athletes often. So, there's partly an opportunity we have to make our talent feel comfortable about talking about sustainability. And if they feel comfortable talking about sustainability, then that's a really easy avenue for the fans to engage with it. And we saw great things already earlier this year with Seb Vettel just going out into the stands and picking litter. Seb can do more impact with that sort of post than you can by releasing loads of perhaps slightly drier text reasons why you should be recycling. In terms of influencing fans and getting to races and things like that, we went through the plastics program earlier this year. We got fans to pledge to reduce plastics in their own behaviours. And when it comes to getting to races, this is an absolutely important thing we're working with on our promoters. We work in 23 very different markets around the world. And what we need to make sure is that our local promoters are helping to put on the right amounts of public transport, opportunities for fans to carpool or to reach the circuits through greener ways, and get incentivized for doing so. And if you look at Zandvoort, the race we had earlier this year, thousands of people turned up on bicycle. Perhaps no surprise, it's the Netherlands, but it was an amazing feat to see. And encouraging everyone to cycle there was both brilliant for them, and it was an activity in itself, but clearly great for reducing the footprint of our fan travel.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've already mentioned about the London 2012 Olympics, and when we did our carbon footprint study back in, I think, 2007, the thing that struck us was a large part of our footprint. Well, there's two big parts of our footprint. One is the design and construction of the venues for the games itself, and the second part was the spectators and the number of spectators flying across the world to get to the games. And I suppose it's with something like the Olympic Games or other major events. I'd like to understand what do you think we should be looking to see next from those major events? What's the big shift that we should be expecting? Fiona?
I think, scope 3, like I said, is the hardest one. We don't, we're a sport. We want to kind of keep our audiences, keep the excitement. That's who we are. We drive that. But I think, and SailGP, we don't have as many fans as like Formula One that come, travel the world yet. Not so many diehard fans. But I think, and COVID has kind of fast-tracked everything. I think the digital world and the virtual world. And I think, to be honest, I think sport needs to do a lot more virtual hospitality and kind of focus really on local. So like where you race, you focus on that, getting that local community engaged. And like, Charlie said, you get people like sustainable transports, you make it easy for them to get to the event. So you kind of incentivize them, work with local partners to get to the event sustainably. But then you do a lot of remote or kind of different access for kind of virtual hospitality, because it was something I was speaking to the BBC Sport guys, like in 2050, there's a World Cup. I mean, you literally will have no fans, right? You literally will have no fans because you can't, because of the emissions. So, the 75% of the World Cup, I think it's 70% actually. I mean, Russell might correct me here. 70% of the footprint of the World Cup is Scope 3 fan travel. So like that can't happen. So it's like, how do you keep sport open to all, keep it accessible, keep it exciting, but use digital better? So I think we need tech innovation in that kind of side of it. Is kind of what I think, but you still want local fans. You want to get people, sport is about passion and engaging people and being there. So I don't think that side of it needs to change. I think it's really the kind of international travel, the virtual travel, the hospitality side is what I think we need to do.
No, that's brilliant. And I completely agree. I mean, I'm an avid football supporter, and watching some of the matches last year with empty stadiums, felt really strange, that you didn't have local supporters back in the grounds making a noise, really kind of pushing on their teams to get the goals, win the matches. I mean, Russell, from your point of view, what do you see as sort of the next shift in sustainability? Let's say these big events like the Olympics.
Look, I think it will depend a lot on what comes out of this COP and future COPs in the next couple of years. Is there going to be much more legislation around this? So, Fiona sort of suggested that we may not be able to travel as much as we're free to do now. So absolutely, if digital picks up, maybe we'll be looking at only people in the host country will go to the actual events, but then we could watch in our major stadia, we could be watching in some kind of virtual recreation, whether it's holograms on the field, whether we've got headsets or whatever. So all sorts of technology could come into play here. Possibly, maybe the IOC will need to be looking at, do we just have one venue per continent, for example, whether it's London or Paris or Los Angeles or Melbourne, Beijing, whichever, and we rotate the games around. So you remove some of the impacts of the building side of things. Now we'll lose some of the social impact where these are regeneration projects, but maybe that will reduce some of the impacts as well. So the fundamental thing that you don't want to lose is the excitement that the fans have, and you always want to have fans at the event. It works for the athletes as well. It's not just the excitement for the fan. The athletes perform better if there are people in the venues. So we've got to strike that balance. Absolutely. All of us on this call and many of the people listening really want to reduce our impacts, but we've got to have that balance that there is so much that sport at all levels actually provides socially in terms of sort of coherence, education, all of this thing that sport provides to us, mental health, physical health. So we've got to make sure we balance environmental impacts with those social benefits as well.
Yeah, I can remember back in 2005 talking about whether you should have a single host for the Olympic Games just to reduce the carbon footprint of building. I mean, it's interesting, Charles, you've mentioned earlier about Seb Vettel. And I wondered whether you could sort of explain a little bit more about kind of the role of athletes, sports personalities, and also in particular, how do you get them to play that particular role model? Because they've got huge influence.
Sure, and look, I touched on some of this earlier. I think when you're at our sport, Formula One, we've actually kind of really only got 20 drivers on the grid. So compared to maybe like the Premier League, it's a relatively small number of athletes. But when we engage with them, they all recognize the importance of this topic, and they all want to be able to have a positive impact. They don't all know how they can do that in the right way, though. This is not a simple topic, and actually, from week to week to month, sometimes the advice on, what's the best alternative to plastic? Is it bamboo or is it not bamboo? Or these things change. So we can actually have a role by making sure that all of our athletes and the people at the kind of the front end of our sport really understand what are the simple take-home messages for fans that they would be able to make a real difference within their own lives, and in a way that gives them confidence to be able to talk about that topic. I think that's something where the more people we get saying the same message, the more likely it is to get picked up by a wider fan base, as opposed to kind of perhaps conflicting or confused messages across the board.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I think certainly for younger people, the idea that their sporting heroes are promoting sustainability, I think, has huge potential for getting our messages across. I'm going to come to you, Fiona, for a specific question about SailGP. And the person who's asked the question has asked, what do you think is the role of international collaboration and cooperation regarding the fight against climate change?
I think obviously there's a UN Sustainable Development Goal about partnerships and collaboration, so it's key and critical. We can't solve this alone. And, you know, we talked, Miguel, who introduced the session. I mean, we are one of the founding signatories for the UN Sport for Climate Action. And that is around how you collaborate, so share learnings across sport, which sport's very competitive. But, you know, we would be working with all the sailing organizations and to share what we're doing, because, you know, it's inefficient to hide what you're doing in sustainability and try and be the best or the fastest or, like, you know, sound the best. I mean, who cares? You know, we all need to share and do it together. So I think collaboration is key. And I think, you know, even in business, they're doing that. You see broadcasters getting together, you know, BBC, Sky, getting together to solve problems, inclusion, as well as environmental sustainability. So I think cross-sector, it's breaking down barriers and sharing. So I think we need to, you know, we need to work probably close with the motor industry to get their innovations into the marine industry. And maybe we can help with our carbon recycling work into that industry. I don't know. We you know, we need to take more time to do that. And I think that to me is critical. And I think one thing about being a global sport like Formula One is it's not easy because we're going to so many different countries, right? So I think us as a sport, we get to see an island nation versus Aarhus, the most sustainable city in the world, pretty much. And then we go to Taranto, which is in Italy, which is a really kind of, you know, regenerative city, which has got a real issue in pollution and in kind of sustainability, and it's trying to get out of it. And so we work with so many different cities and countries, and it's, I suppose, collaborating to share learnings. And, you know, I think I said before, don't be judgmental. I think sports' job is not to judge people and tell people they're doing wrong. It's to kind of collaborate and kind of inspire people and try and help them on the journey. I think that's really important, that kind of change of tone and working, because we don't have time. Otherwise, there's just no time. It's so inefficient way of looking at everything.
Yeah, I mean, it's collaboration, cooperation. You know, it's going to be one of the means by which we can tackle climate change. And certainly, again, you know, when we were building London 2012, I think one of the great things we did was we looked at a number of organisations who we wanted to work with in order that we could draw on their knowledge and combine that knowledge with our own to deliver sustainable games. And more recently, you know, UCL has worked with McLaren to develop a breathing apparatus as part of a response to COVID. So, you know, collaboration is really quite important, and working with sporting organisations is really important. I mean, Russell, from your point of view with BASIS, I mean, what I wondered was, what's the sort of most popular sustainability support request that you're getting from your network? What are people interested in getting your help with?
Completely honestly, it's a very general, can you help us? And I think what that reflects is that there are so many organisations now that want to do something in this area, know that they should be doing something in this area, but don't know what that should be. So absolutely honestly, it is simply that. It's a very general, where do we start? What can we do? And how can you help? Beyond that, being more specific, it is probably the obvious ones. It is around carbon and it is around waste. And the trickier one is around transport. But those are the ones that are probably food, the hospitality, the food we provide, the way people get to the venues, and the energy that we use to power those venues is at least sort of 80% of the impact that we have anyway. But yeah, we probably 80 to 90% of our emails are simply, what can we do? But that's positive. That is absolutely positive, because people want to start to make those changes and want that direction. And clearly we can then go in and assist in every way we can.
And to ask a rather cheeky follow-up question, because I'm really interested in this. I mean, obviously beyond Formula One and SailGP, who are obviously the leaders, which of the sports should we be looking at and saying, actually, they're doing a really good job in this area?
I think it does vary. I don't think there's any sport you can point to say they're even close to perfect. I think the sports that are closest to the environment are the ones that have picked this up first. So it is sailing, it is the snow sports. It's sports like triathlon. You know, if you're open water swimming, you need a decent environment, and you see these things around you. Wherever your environment, your natural environment is also your playing area, you see these impacts around you. You see the weather's changing. I think that cricket is starting to do a lot more. And you know, cricket is very much impacted by weather, even in terms of just playing conditions. But then there are really good examples pretty much within every sport. There are some good examples who are already doing a huge amount. So no sport is perfect. Some sports are slightly better than others. But I think all of them are now realising, even sports that are played indoors, are starting to have conversations around what they can do for sustainability.
Makes me interested in sort of the global reach of sports as well, which I think is also quite interesting. And when you look at Formula One, sailing, obviously your global sports, which have a huge impact on different cultures, different societies, and Charles, for Formula One, you have a huge potential to use that impact for good. And I wonder whether actually, you know, you're looking at this kind of cultural question as well as sort of the environmental challenge that you've got.
Yeah, and you know, we really do race in some pretty varied environments and countries around the world. I think what's been encouraging, certainly from the environmental sustainability aspect, when we talk to our promoters, whatever stage of maturity that country's in, they're all really keen to learn more. And I say that because, you know, we kind of sometimes look at things from a bit of a westernized perspective, where you assume that, oh, let's have recycling because recycling is, you know, what we should be doing. You know, Bahrain introduced recycling at their circuit for the first time this year. But to get that put in place was a big shift. That's not something that's readily available in municipalities. And what they're doing now is they've continued to roll that out for the rest of the year at a circuit. And they've bid in, and they're going to do some more things and make their race a renewable race next year. So for us, the cultural aspect of it, and it's linked to the sustainability part, is some of those countries where we race in, where the fans aren't automatically used to things like recycling or reducing plastics. It's how we can use our F1 events as an opportunity for them to become comfortable with it, to see it in practice, to understand a little bit more about what the impacts that those kind of products with those plastics and things do have. So that's where we think we can play an important role culturally and societally, in not just supporting kind of with the direct processes that we do at our races, but also giving those fans and spectators that attend a message to take home with them. And we've looped that into things that we're doing with STEM, with schools, with all education topics, to really engage with those local communities.
Fantastic. And I mean, you know, coming to you, Fiona, as with a similar question. I mean, obviously, you know, you're equally global in reach. You've touched upon some of the countries that you operate in. You know,
angry sausage dog. Hold on.
What dog has just been barking beside me? I wondered how do you reach into these sort of cultural challenges?
I think you just have to, sorry, my dog's been so annoying now. You just have to be really conscious of it, like you said, and like take time to understand, you know, their cultural, where they are on the sustainability journey, and support them and not be judgmental, not assume knowledge. So I think that's kind of really what you need to do, is take the time to do that. And I think for us, you know, it's all about commitment. It's not about who's perfect. No one's perfect. I think we've said that on this call, and it's about, are they committed and how can we help them? I think that's the committed is the big word. You know, there's a lot of people who talk a good game, but are you really committed to this? Is where we start. But it is challenging, and, you know, we have lots of different conversations and we try our best at every venue, but, you know, it is challenging across the kind of global reach of the sport.
That's great. Right, I'm going to have to wrap it up there. And I'll firstly say a thank you to our amazing panellists, Fiona, Russell and Charles. Thanks for answering the questions, and thanks for such an engaging discussion with me. I also want to thank the audience for your time today. I hope you've taken something away from this, and please stay tuned for us for the next session.
Thanks very much, everyone. Take care.
Thank you.